To our amazing viewers at Cheating Tales Lab, welcome and thank you. Your presence makes these stories worth sharing. We'd love to hear, which part of the world are you joining us from? Let us know. Now, let's dive into today's story. Chapter 1. Cracks in Paradise. Derek Sullivan stood in the doorway of his modest suburban home, watching his wife Ashley laugh into her phone while stirring pasta sauce. At 32, Derek had built what he thought was a solid life. A steady job as a software engineer, a comfortable house in a quiet neighborhood, and two beautiful children, Emma and Lucas. But lately, something felt off. Ashley had grown distant over the past 6 months. The woman who once greeted him with enthusiastic kisses now barely looked up from her phone when he walked through the door. Her auburn hair was always perfectly styled these days, her makeup flawless even for trips to the grocery store. She'd joined a new gym, bought new clothes, and started working late at the marketing firm where she'd recently been promoted. "Who was that?" Derek asked, setting his laptop bag on the kitchen counter. "Just Brianna from work," Ashley replied without looking at him, her green eyes focused on the bubbling sauce. "We're planning the Henderson campaign launch." Derek had heard that name a lot lately. Brianna this, Brianna that. He'd never met this supposed co-worker, despite Ashley's frequent mentions of after-work drinks and weekend strategy sessions. "Maybe I could meet her sometime," Derek suggested. "We could all grab dinner." Ashley's stirring paused for just a moment. "She's really busy. You wouldn't like her anyway. She's very intense about work." Derek nodded, pushing down the uncomfortable feeling in his gut. He trusted Ashley. They'd been together for 8 years, married for 6. She'd been his anchor through his father's death, his support when he'd struggled to find his footing in his career. But something was definitely changing. The front door burst open, and 9-year-old Emma bounded in, followed by 6-year-old Lucas. Their backpacks hit the floor with identical thuds as they raced to the kitchen. "Dad," Emma wrapped her arms around Derek's waist. "Can we go to the Science Museum this weekend? Mrs. Patterson said they have a new space exhibit." "We'll see, sweetheart," Derek said, ruffling her brown hair. "We might be visiting Grandma Barbara." Ashley's jaw tightened. Derek's mother, Barbara Sullivan, had never fully accepted Ashley into the family. The woman had a way of making cutting remarks disguised as helpful suggestions, and Ashley had grown increasingly resentful over the years. "Actually," Ashley said, turning from the stove, "I think the kids and I might skip this visit. I have a lot of work to catch up on." Derek frowned. "Mom specifically asked for all of us to come. She's planning something special." "Your mother's special usually means finding new ways to criticize my parenting while pretending to help." Ashley's voice carried an edge Derek rarely heard. "Besides, I really do have deadlines." The conversation was interrupted by Derek's phone buzzing. A text from his mother. "Looking forward to seeing everyone Sunday. Ashley's family is welcome too if they'd like to join." Derek showed Ashley the message, hoping it might soften her stance. Instead, her expression darkened further. "See? She only includes my family as an afterthought. It's always about making me feel like an outsider." Ashley turned back to the stove with more force than necessary. "Tell your mother we appreciate the invitation, but we're busy." That night, after the kids were asleep, Derek found Ashley in their bedroom, typing furiously on her laptop. She closed it quickly when he entered. "Work email," she explained, sliding the laptop onto her nightstand. Derek settled into bed beside her, reaching for her hand. "Ash, is everything okay? You seem stressed lately." She pulled her hand away gently. "Just work pressure. The Henderson campaign is huge for the firm. Maybe you should take a break. We could plan a weekend getaway, just the two of us. My mom could watch the kids." Ashley's laugh was sharp. "Your mother watching my children? She'd probably have them calling me by my first name and critiquing my lunch choices." Derek sighed. The relationship between Ashley and his mother had always been strained, but it seemed to be getting worse. Barbara Sullivan was admittedly difficult, a retired school principal with strong opinions about everything from child rearing to career choices. She'd made it clear she thought Derek could have done better than Ashley, a community college graduate who'd worked her way up in marketing. "She means well," Derek said quietly. "Does she?" Ashley turned away from him. "Because last time we visited, she spent 20 minutes explaining to Emma why some mothers don't prioritize home-cooked meals. I was standing right there." Derek couldn't deny his mother's tactlessness. Barbara Sullivan had a gift for delivering insults wrapped in concern. But she was still his mother, and despite her flaws, She'd raised him alone after his father's heart attack when Derek was 12. "I'll talk to her," Derek promised. Ashley didn't respond. Within minutes, her breathing had evened into sleep, leaving Derek staring at the ceiling and wondering when his life had become so complicated. The next morning brought an unexpected call from Ashley's sister, Nicole. Derek answered while Ashley was in the shower. "Hey, Derek." Nicole's voice sounded strange. "Is Ashley around? She's getting ready for work. Want me to have her call you back?" There was a long pause. "Actually, maybe we could talk. Are you free for lunch today?" Derek's stomach clenched. Nicole and Ashley were close, but Nicole had never asked to meet with him privately. "Is everything okay?" "Just, there are some things I think you should know." They agreed to meet at a small cafe downtown. Derek spent the morning trying to focus on code reviews and debugging, but his mind kept drifting to Nicole's ominous tone. When lunchtime arrived, he found her already seated in a corner booth, looking uncomfortable. Nicole had Ashley's same auburn hair, but lacked her sister's polished appearance. She was a nurse, practical and straightforward, and she'd always treated Derek with genuine warmth. "Thanks for meeting me," she said as Derek sat down. "This isn't easy." Derek's heart began to race. "What's going on, Nicole?" She pulled out her phone and hesitated. "A friend of mine works at the Marriott downtown. She sent me this yesterday." The photo on her screen showed Ashley and a man Derek didn't recognize sitting close together in what looked like a hotel bar. The man was tall with dark hair, wearing an expensive suit. Ashley's hand was on his arm, and they were leaning toward each other intimately. Derek felt the world tilt slightly. "Who is he?" "Kevin Mitchell. He's a client at Ashley's firm, runs a construction company. My friend says they've been meeting there for months." Nicole's voice was gentle but firm. "I'm sorry, Derek. I went back and forth about telling you, but I couldn't watch you be played for a fool." Derek stared at the photo, his mind reeling. The after-work meetings, the new clothes, the sudden interest in her appearance. It all clicked into place with devastating clarity. "How long?" he asked quietly. "My friend first saw them about 4 months ago." "But Derek." Nicole reached across the table. "There's something else. Ashley brought him to our cousin Jenny's wedding last month. Introduced him as her boyfriend." The words hit Derek like a physical blow. While he'd been home with the kids, Ashley had been parading her affair partner at family functions, openly claiming to be single. Derek's hands shook as he handed the phone back. "Does your family know about me? About the kids?" Nicole's silence was answer enough. Derek drove home in a daze, his mind spinning with questions and rage. How long had this been going on? How many lies had Ashley told? And what about Emma and Lucas? Did they have any idea their mother was living a double life? When he arrived home, Ashley was in the kitchen preparing dinner, humming softly. She looked so normal, so innocent, that for a moment Derek wondered if Nicole had made a mistake. But then Ashley's phone buzzed, and Derek saw her face light up as she read the message. "Who's that?" Derek asked, his voice surprisingly steady. "Brianna," Ashley replied without hesitation. "She wants to grab drinks after the Morrison presentation tomorrow." Another lie, so smooth and automatic it was clearly well practiced. Derek felt something cold and hard settle in his chest. This wasn't just an affair, it was a complete betrayal of everything they'd built together. "How's the Henderson campaign going?" Derek asked carefully. Ashley launched into an elaborate story about client meetings and strategy sessions, weaving fiction with such skill that Derek marveled at her talent for deception. As she spoke, Derek found himself studying her face, looking for signs of the woman he'd fallen in love with. But all he saw was a stranger wearing his wife's face. That night, Derek lay awake planning his next move. He could confront Ashley directly, but something told him he needed more information first. If she could lie this easily about an affair, what else was she hiding? Derek Sullivan had always been methodical, analytical. It was what made him good at his job. Now, he would apply those same skills to unraveling his wife's web of lies. And when he was done, he would make sure everyone involved understood the true cost of betraying him. The Ashley he'd loved was gone, replaced by someone who could look him in the eye and lie without flinching. But she'd made one crucial mistake. She'd underestimated Derek's capacity for patience and planning. She was about to learn that some people, when pushed too far, don't just break. They shatter everything around them. Chapter 2. Unraveling Truths. Derek spent the next week in careful reconnaissance, his software engineering background serving him well in gathering digital evidence. Ashley had grown careless with her phone, leaving it unlocked while she showered or stepped outside. Derek discovered a trail of messages that painted a picture far worse than simple infidelity. Kevin Mitchell wasn't just Ashley's lover. He was her escape plan. The messages revealed Ashley's contempt for Derek, mocking his boring job and pathetic salary. She'd told Kevin that Derek was controlling and emotionally distant, painting herself as a victim trapped in a loveless marriage. But the most devastating discovery came in a message thread from 3 weeks earlier. Ashley, Derek's mom is having another family gathering. The usual performance where I pretend to be grateful while she passive-aggressively tears me apart. Kevin, you don't have to put up with that much longer. Once my divorce is finalized, we can make this official. Ashley, I can't wait. Derek will probably curl up in a corner and cry. He's so weak, I almost feel sorry for him. Derek stared at his phone screen, feeling something fundamental shift inside him. The woman he'd loved, supported, and protected for 8 years saw him as weak. She was planning to leave him and take their children, all while playing the victim. But Ashley had miscalculated. Derek wasn't weak, he was methodical. And now she'd given him all the motivation he needed. Derek's investigation revealed that Kevin Mitchell was indeed married, with 2 children of his own. His wife, Stephanie, was a pediatric nurse who clearly had no idea about her husband's double life. Derek filed this information away for future use. The following Sunday brought the dreaded family gathering at Barbara Sullivan's house. Derek's mother lived in an imposing Victorian home that had been in the family for 3 generations. At 68, Barbara maintained the property with fierce pride, every surface polished, every flower bed meticulously maintained. Ashley had reluctantly agreed to attend after Derek mentioned that her absence would only give Barbara more ammunition for criticism. As they pulled into the circular driveway, Derek noticed several additional cars, his cousin Michael's truck, his Aunt Linda's sedan, and a vehicle he didn't recognize. Great, Ashley muttered. The whole cavalry is here to witness my latest humiliation. Emma and Lucas bounded out of the car, excited to see their grandmother despite the tension between the adults. Derek watched Ashley compose herself, sliding on the bright smile she wore like armor to these events. Barbara Sullivan greeted them at the door, her silver hair perfectly coiffed, wearing a navy dress that somehow managed to look both elegant and intimidating. She hugged the children warmly before turning to Derek and Ashley. Derek, sweetheart, she kissed his cheek. Ashley, you look refreshed. It was classic Barbara, a compliment that somehow felt like an insult. Ashley's smile tightened imperceptibly. Thank you, Barbara. You look wonderful as always. Inside, Derek discovered the reason for the extra cars. His cousin Michael was there with his wife Janet and their 3 children. His Aunt Linda had brought her new boyfriend, Carl. But the surprise was Ashley's sister Nicole, who'd apparently been invited directly by Barbara. I hope you don't mind, Barbara said, noticing Derek's questioning look. I called Nicole yesterday. I thought it would be nice to have more family together. Derek caught Nicole's eye across the room. She gave him a subtle nod. She hadn't revealed their lunch conversation, but her presence felt like silent support. The afternoon proceeded with its usual uncomfortable rhythm. Barbara made pointed comments about working mothers and family priorities while serving an elaborate meal that Ashley couldn't have prepared on her best day. Ashley endured it with practiced grace, but Derek could see the anger building behind her eyes. Then Barbara dropped her bombshell. I have some exciting news, she announced as dessert was served. I've decided to plan a family vacation this summer. A week at the beach house in Outer Banks that the Hendersons are renting out. Derek's Aunt Linda clapped her hands together. What a wonderful idea. The kids will love it. Now, it's not huge, Barbara continued, but it should be perfect for our family. There are 4 bedrooms, so Derek and Ashley can have one, the children another, and I'll take the master. Michael's family can use the living room with air mattresses. It'll be like camping. Ashley's fork clinked against her plate. What about Nicole? And Carl? Barbara smiled serenely. Well, that's the thing about beach houses. Limited space means we have to prioritize immediate family. I'm sure Nicole understands. Derek watched his wife's face flush with anger. This was exactly the kind of deliberate slight that Ashley had endured for years, being technically included while being made to feel unwelcome. Actually, Ashley said carefully, our work schedules might not allow for a full week. Derek's been working on some important projects. Derek hadn't been working on anything particularly urgent, but he stayed silent, curious to see where this would go. "Oh, but surely Derek can take time off for family," Barbara insisted. "This might be one of our last chances for a big family vacation while the children are still young enough to enjoy it." Nicole cleared her throat. "I could help with accommodations. Maybe Ashley's family could join us. Make it a real reunion." Barbara's smile became glacial. "That's sweet, Nicole, but I'm afraid the house really only comfortably fits our immediate family. Perhaps Ashley's family could find their own rental nearby." The message was clear. Ashley's family wasn't Barbara's family, even after 8 years of marriage. Derek felt a familiar surge of frustration with his mother's behavior, but something else was stirring too, a cold calculation. Ashley set down her fork with deliberate care. "You know what, Barbara? You're absolutely right about space limitations. In fact, I think Derek and the kids would enjoy the vacation much more without me there. I wouldn't want to crowd anyone." "Ashley," Derek started, but she was already standing. "I'm going to check on Lucas," she said, her voice tight with controlled anger. After she left the room, Barbara turned to Derek with satisfaction. "I think that went well. Sometimes people need to understand their place in the family hierarchy." Derek stared at his mother, seeing her clearly for perhaps the first time. Barbara Sullivan wasn't just difficult, she was cruel. She took pleasure in making Ashley feel unwelcome, in asserting her dominance over her son's family. But unlike Ashley, Derek knew how to play the long game. "You're right, Mom," Derek said quietly. "People do need to understand their place." Later that evening, as they drove home in tense silence, Ashley finally exploded. "I can't do this anymore, Derek. I won't subject myself or our children to your mother's poison another minute." "She doesn't mean to." "Yes, she does." Ashley's voice was sharp with years of accumulated hurt. "She absolutely means to hurt me, and you just sit there and let it happen. Every time." Derek felt a strange detachment as he listened to Ashley's outburst. She was right about his mother's cruelty, but her words felt hollow given what he now knew about her own betrayals. "What do you want me to do?" Derek asked. "Stand up for me. Tell her that I'm your wife, that we're a family, and if she can't respect me, she doesn't get access to us." Derek nodded slowly. "You're right. I should protect my family." Something in his tone made Ashley look at him sharply, but Derek's expression remained neutral. He would indeed protect his family, Emma and Lucas. As for Ashley, she'd forfeited any claim to his protection the moment she'd started planning her exit strategy with Kevin Mitchell. That night, Derek lay in bed listening to Ashley's breathing, planning his next move. His mother had unwittingly given him a valuable piece of information. The vacation was planned for mid-July, just 6 weeks away. That gave him a timeline for his own plans. Derek had always been patient, methodical. Ashley had mistaken those qualities for weakness, just as his mother had mistaken his tolerance for submission. But patience wasn't weakness, it was preparation. And Derek had been preparing his whole life for a moment when he would need to be ruthless. He pulled out his phone and began typing a message to a private investigator he'd researched during his lunch breaks. If Ashley wanted to play games, Derek would ensure he knew all the rules first. As he hit send, Derek felt something cold and final settle in his chest. The Derek who had trusted blindly, who had absorbed insults and betrayals in the name of keeping peace, was gone. In his place was someone harder, someone who understood that sometimes you had to destroy everything to save what truly mattered. Ashley stirred beside him, murmuring something in her sleep. Derek wondered if she was dreaming about Kevin Mitchell, about her planned escape from their boring life together. She would get her escape, Derek thought grimly, but it wouldn't be anything like what she'd imagined. Chapter 3: The Gathering Storm. Derek's private investigator, a retired police detective named Tony Ricci, proved to be worth every dollar of his substantial fee. Within 2 weeks, Derek had a comprehensive file on Kevin Mitchell that painted a picture of a man with expensive tastes and questionable financial practices. Kevin's construction company, Mitchell and Associates, specialized in high-end residential projects. On paper, the business appeared successful, but Tony's investigation revealed a pattern of cost overruns, delayed payments to subcontractors, and several pending lawsuits from disgruntled clients. More importantly, Kevin was leveraged to the hilt. His flashy lifestyle was funded entirely by debt and creative accounting. Derek studied the financial documents in his home office while Ashley was at another late work meeting. The irony wasn't lost on him that while his wife was planning to leave him for a man she thought was wealthy, Kevin Mitchell was actually teetering on the edge of bankruptcy. But Derek's investigation had uncovered something even more valuable than Kevin's financial troubles. Mitchell and Associates had been hired for a major renovation project at the Grandview Resort, a luxury property that had been struggling financially for years. The owner, an elderly man named Harold Pemberton, was looking to sell after the renovation was complete. Derek had done some research on Harold Pemberton and discovered that the man's grandson, David, worked for the same software company where Derek was employed. David Pemberton was a senior architect in the cloud computing division, and Derek had helped him solve a particularly complex integration problem 6 months earlier. Sometimes, Derek reflected, the universe provided exactly the tools you needed. Meanwhile, the situation at home continued to deteriorate. Ashley had grown increasingly bold in her deception, staying out later and showing less concern about covering her tracks. She'd started taking calls in private, stepping onto the back patio or into the garage whenever her phone rang. Derek maintained his facade of ignorance while carefully documenting everything. He'd installed a small recording device in Ashley's car and had Tony follow her on several occasions. The evidence was overwhelming. Ashley and Kevin were together constantly, often checking into hotels in the middle of the day. But the most damaging evidence came from Ashley herself. During a conversation that Derek recorded, Ashley had laughed about Derek's pathetic attempts to save their marriage, mocking his suggestion of couples counseling and dismissing his efforts to plan romantic date nights. "He actually thinks I want to work things out," Ashley had told Kevin during one of their hotel meetings. "It's almost sad how clueless he is. Once your divorce is final, I'll file mine and we can start our real life together." Derek played this recording several times, feeling his resolve harden with each repetition. Ashley wasn't just having an affair. She was actively deceiving him while planning to destroy their family. The woman he'd loved had become someone he didn't recognize, someone who took pleasure in his humiliation. The divorce proceedings for Ashley's affair partner provided another opportunity. Derek learned that Kevin's wife, Stephanie, had filed first, citing irreconcilable differences. But Derek's investigation suggested she didn't know about Kevin's affair with Ashley. The divorce appeared to be related to Kevin's gambling debts and financial irresponsibility. Derek decided Stephanie deserved to know the truth about her husband's extracurricular activities. He had Tony compile a careful package of evidence, photos, hotel receipts, and records of Kevin's meetings with Ashley, and send it anonymously to Stephanie's divorce attorney. The response was swift and devastating. Within days, Kevin's divorce proceedings shifted from an amicable settlement to a vicious battle. Stephanie's attorney amended their filing to include adultery charges and demanded a larger share of marital assets. Kevin was suddenly facing financial ruin on multiple fronts. Derek watched the drama unfold with cold satisfaction. Ashley came home from her meetings with Kevin looking increasingly stressed, though she couldn't explain her mood without revealing the affair. Derek played the concerned husband perfectly, offering support and suggesting that work stress might be affecting her health. "Maybe you should cut back on the evening meetings," Derek suggested over dinner one night. "You seem exhausted lately." Ashley's laugh was sharp with tension. "I can't just cut back. This campaign is crucial for my career." Emma looked up from her chicken nuggets. "Mommy, why do you have to work so much?" "Sarah's mom is always home for dinner." Derek saw Ashley flinch at their daughter's innocent question. For a moment, something like guilt flickered across her face before the mask slipped back into place. "Some families are different, sweetheart," Ashley said carefully. "Mommy has to work hard so we can have nice things." Derek filed away another piece of evidence for future use. Ashley was already laying groundwork to justify her eventual departure, framing herself as the hard-working parent sacrificing for the family's benefit. The family vacation to Outer Banks was approaching, and Derek had confirmed his participation with his mother while Ashley had definitively declined. Barbara Sullivan had made several more cutting comments about commitment to family and priorities, clearly enjoying Ashley's exclusion. Derek had initially planned to skip the vacation as well, but now he saw it differently. A week away from Ashley would give him uninterrupted time with Emma and Lucas, and it would provide the perfect cover for the next phase of his plan. 3 days before the vacation, Derek met with David Pemberton for coffee. David was a soft-spoken man in his 40s who'd always struck Derek as genuine and straightforward. Their conversation began with work topics, but gradually shifted to more personal matters. Your grandfather's resort looks beautiful in the photos, Derek mentioned casually. I've been thinking about planning a family vacation somewhere special. David's face lit up. Grandpa would love that place to host more families. He's actually looking to sell, but he wants to make sure it goes to someone who appreciates what he built. Derek expressed interest, and David promised to arrange a meeting with his grandfather. By the end of their coffee, Derek had planted the seeds for what he hoped would become a life-changing opportunity. That evening, Derek found Ashley on the phone in the garage, speaking in hushed, urgent tones. He couldn't make out the words, but her body language radiated stress and frustration. When she returned to the house, her eyes were red as if she'd been crying. "Everything okay?" Derek asked. "Fine," Ashley snapped, then caught herself. "Sorry, just work drama. You know how it is." Derek nodded sympathetically, all while calculating his next move. Ashley's world was starting to crumble, though she didn't realize Derek was the architect of her troubles. Kevin's financial and legal problems were mounting, making him a less attractive escape route. Soon, Ashley would be forced to choose between staying in a marriage she wanted to leave or tying herself to a man whose life was falling apart. Derek had no intention of making that choice easy for her. The night before the family vacation, Derek tucked Emma and Lucas into bed while Ashley worked late again. Emma had asked why Mommy couldn't come to the beach, and Derek had explained that sometimes grown-ups had work responsibilities they couldn't avoid. "But you're coming with us, right, Daddy?" Lucas asked, his 6-year-old face serious with concern. "I wouldn't miss it, buddy," Derek assured him, feeling a fierce protectiveness toward his children. They didn't deserve to be casualties in their mother's selfish games. After the kids were asleep, Derek sat in his home office reviewing his plans. The private investigator had provided him with enough evidence to destroy Ashley in any divorce proceeding. The anonymous tip to Kevin's wife had triggered a chain reaction that was systematically dismantling Kevin's life. And his conversation with David Pemberton had opened a door to possibilities Derek was just beginning to explore. Derek Sullivan had spent years being the patient, forgiving husband. He'd absorbed his mother's criticism, overlooked Ashley's growing coldness, and tried to keep his family together through sheer force of will. But patience and forgiveness, he'd learned, were luxuries he could no longer afford. Ashley had made her choice when she decided Derek was weak enough to betray without consequences. Now she would learn exactly how wrong she'd been about the man she'd married. The old Derek had died the day Nicole showed him that photograph. In his place was someone harder, smarter, and infinitely more dangerous. Someone who understood that in life, as in chess, the most devastating moves were the ones your opponent never saw coming. Derek closed his laptop and headed to bed, where Ashley lay sleeping peacefully, oblivious to the storm gathering around her. Tomorrow, he would begin the final phase of his plan. And by the time Ashley realized what was happening, it would be far too late to stop it. Chapter 4: Strategic Positioning. The Outer Banks vacation began exactly as Derek had anticipated. A week of forced family bonding punctuated by his mother's passive-aggressive commentary and his cousin Michael's loud attempts to prove he was the family's success story. But Derek had come with his own agenda that had nothing to do with sandcastles or family harmony. On the second day, while Barbara supervised the children's beach activities and Michael regaled anyone within earshot about his latest real estate ventures, Derek made his excuses and drove to Harold Pemberton's Grandview Resort, an hour inland. The property was even more impressive in person than in the photos David had shown him. Set on 200 acres of pristine lakefront, the resort featured a main lodge with 30 guest rooms, 6 luxury cabins, a full-service spa, restaurant, and conference facilities. Despite its obvious quality, the property felt tired, the kind of decline that came from deferred maintenance and lack of capital investment. Harold Pemberton was a sprightly 82-year-old with sharp eyes and a firm handshake. His love for the property was evident in every word as he gave Derek a comprehensive tour, explaining the resort's history and his vision for its future. "Built this place 40 years ago with my late wife," Harold explained as they walked through the main lodge. "We wanted to create something special, a place where families could make memories. But I'm getting too old to give it the attention it deserves." Derek listened carefully, asking thoughtful questions about occupancy rates, operating costs, and capital improvement needs. His software engineering background had taught him to analyze complex systems, and he applied those skills to understanding the resort's business model. The numbers Harold shared painted a picture of a property with enormous potential held back by undercapitalization. The resort had a solid reputation and strong repeat clientele, but it needed significant investment in technology, marketing, and infrastructure to reach its full potential. "I've had several offers from development companies," Harold confided as they stood on the main lodge's wraparound porch, looking out over the lake. "They want to tear everything down and build condominiums. But that's not what Evelyn and I envisioned when we built this place." Derek sensed an opportunity. "What would you consider an ideal outcome for the sale?" Harold's eyes lit up. "Someone who understands what we built here. Someone who'd preserve the family atmosphere while growing the business. David mentioned you have children. That gives me hope you'd appreciate what makes this place special." Derek spent 3 hours with Harold, absorbing every detail about the resort's operations. By the time he left, he had a clear understanding of the property's value and Harold's motivations. More importantly, he'd planted the idea that he might be the kind of buyer Harold was looking for. During the drive back to the beach house, Derek called Tony Ricci for an update on the Ashley and Kevin situation. The news was even better than he'd hoped. "Mitchell's in serious trouble," Tony reported. The adultery evidence in his divorce case triggered a clause in his business loan agreements. His primary lender is calling in their notes, and his biggest client just canceled a $1 million project after learning about the lawsuit from his subcontractors. Derek absorbed this information with grim satisfaction. "What about Ashley?" "She's been meeting with Mitchell more frequently, and their conversations are getting heated. My contact at the hotel says they've had several loud arguments in the bar. Whatever they had planned is falling apart." Derek thanked Tony and ended the call, feeling pieces of his plan clicking into place. Kevin Mitchell's financial collapse would force Ashley to reevaluate her exit strategy, but Derek had no intention of offering her a soft landing. That evening at the beach house, Derek played the role of devoted father and dutiful son while mentally calculating real estate financing options. Barbara made her usual pointed comments about Ashley's absence, but Derek deflected them with practiced ease. "Ashley sends her love," Derek lied smoothly. "She's disappointed to miss this, but work demands have been intense lately." "Of course they have," Barbara replied with acid sweetness. "Some people prioritize career advancement over family obligations." Derek's cousin Michael, emboldened by several beers, decided to join the conversation. "You should put your foot down, Derek. A wife's place is with her family, not chasing some corporate ladder." Derek looked at Michael with new eyes, seeing him clearly for the first time. Michael owned 3 rental properties and constantly lectured anyone who'd listen about building wealth through real estate, but his total net worth was probably less than Derek's annual salary. Yet here he was, dispensing marriage advice based on outdated gender roles and personal failures. "Different families handle things differently," Derek said mildly, while internally cataloging Michael as another person who'd underestimated him. The next day brought a call from David Pemberton that accelerated Derek's timeline considerably. Harold had been so impressed with their meeting that he'd decided to take the property off the market temporarily, giving Derek 30 days to arrange financing and make a formal offer. "Grandpa really connected with you," David explained. "He said you understood the soul of the place, not just the business potential." Derek assured David of his serious interest while privately marveling at how quickly opportunities had begun aligning. A year ago, he'd been a comfortable but unremarkable software engineer with a stable marriage and a modest savings account. Now he was positioning himself to purchase a multi-million-dollar resort while orchestrating the systematic destruction of his wife's affair. The transformation felt both gradual and sudden, like watching a photograph develop in a darkroom. Each piece of evidence, each strategic move, each careful conversation had been building toward this moment when Derek Sullivan would emerge as someone entirely different from who everyone thought he was. On the 4th day of vacation, Ashley called while Derek was helping the children build an elaborate sand fortress. Her voice carried a strain Derek had never heard before. "How's the vacation going?" she asked, her attempt at normalcy falling flat. "Great. The kids are having a wonderful time. How's work?" There was a long pause. "Actually, I might need to take some time off soon. The Henderson campaign is experiencing some complications." Derek understood that Ashley was really talking about Kevin's problems, but he played ignorant. "That's too bad. Maybe a break would be good for you, though. You've seemed stressed lately." Yeah, maybe. Ashley's voice was small, uncertain in a way Derek had never heard. Derek, when you get back, maybe we could talk? Really talk, I mean. Of course. We should always be able to talk. After ending the call, Derek sat on the beach watching Emma and Lucas play in the surf, their laughter carried away by the ocean breeze. Whatever Ashley wanted to discuss, Derek doubted it would be a confession of her affair. More likely, she was beginning to realize that Kevin Mitchell wasn't the escape route she'd imagined. That evening, Derek called his financial advisor to discuss liquidating investment accounts and arranging bridge financing for the resort purchase. The numbers were substantial but manageable, especially if Derek was willing to leverage his current home's equity and cash in his retirement accounts. Under normal circumstances, such a dramatic financial move would require spousal approval and careful joint planning. But Derek's circumstances were far from normal, and Ashley's signature on the necessary documents could be obtained through careful misdirection. Derek had learned that in war, and make no mistake, this was war, victory went to whoever could think furthest ahead while maintaining the element of surprise. Ashley had been planning her exit strategy for months, but she'd made the fatal error of underestimating her opponent. She thought Derek was weak, predictable, someone who would absorb betrayal and humiliation without fighting back. She was about to discover just how wrong she'd been about the man she'd married, and by the time she realized her mistake, Derek would be holding all the cards. The remaining days of vacation passed in a blur of family activities and secret phone calls to lawyers, financial advisors, and business consultants. Derek played his role perfectly, the devoted father, the dutiful son, the unsuspecting husband, while methodically arranging the financial instruments that would transform his life. By the time they returned home, Derek had secured preliminary approval for the resort financing and scheduled a formal meeting with Harold Pemberton for the following week. Ashley greeted them with forced enthusiasm, but Derek could see the cracks in her composure. Kevin Mitchell's world was collapsing, and Ashley was finally beginning to understand that her carefully laid plans were built on quicksand. That night, as Ashley showered off the day's stress, Derek sat in his home office reviewing the legal documents his attorney had prepared. Divorce papers, custody agreements, restraining orders, everything he might need to protect himself and his children when Ashley's world finally imploded. Derek Sullivan had spent 32 years learning to be patient, methodical, and strategic. Now, all of those qualities were focused on a single objective, ensuring that when the dust settled, he would be the one left standing with everything that truly mattered. Ashley had taught him that love could be weaponized, that trust could be exploited, and that the people closest to you could inflict the deepest wounds. Now Derek would teach her that some lessons, once learned, could never be unlearned. Chapter 5. Closing the Trap. Ashley's attempt at a real talk came 3 days after Derek's return from the beach. She'd prepared carefully. Dinner at their favorite restaurant, the children staying overnight with Derek's Aunt Linda, soft lighting, and her most flattering dress. Derek recognized the performance for what it was, damage control. "I've been thinking about us," Ashley began over wine she'd ordered specifically for the occasion. "About our marriage, our future." Derek nodded encouragingly while studying his wife's face. The polished confidence that had characterized her recent months was cracking, replaced by something that looked almost like desperation. "I know I've been distant lately," Ashley continued, her green eyes not quite meeting his. "Work has been overwhelming, and I think I've lost perspective on what's really important." "I've noticed you've seemed stressed," Derek replied carefully. "Is there anything specific I can help with?" Ashley's laugh had a brittle quality. "You're always trying to fix things, aren't you? That's one of the things She paused, seeming to recalibrate her approach. "One of the things I've always loved about you." Derek recognized the manipulation even as part of him responded to the familiar words. This was the Ashley he'd fallen in love with, vulnerable, seeking connection, making him feel needed and important. But now he could see the calculation behind her expressions, the way she calibrated each word for maximum impact. "The Henderson campaign has been more challenging than I expected," Ashley said, taking a larger sip of wine. "There have been some complications with the client relationship." Derek understood she was really talking about Kevin Mitchell's mounting problems, but he maintained his facade of ignorance. "What kind of complications?" "Financial issues on their end. Legal problems. It's affecting our ability to execute the campaign effectively." Ashley's voice carried genuine stress now. I might need to step back from the account. Derek made sympathetic noises while mentally updating his timeline. If Ashley was considering distancing herself from Kevin professionally, his personal situation must be even worse than Tony had reported. Maybe that would be for the best, Derek suggested. You could focus on accounts that don't come with so much drama. Ashley nodded quickly, too quickly. Exactly. I want to get back to focusing on what matters. Our family, our marriage. The irony was almost overwhelming. Ashley was seeking refuge in the marriage she'd been planning to abandon, with the man she described as weak and pathetic to her lover. But Derek played his part perfectly, reaching across the table to take her hand. I'm glad you want to work on us, he said softly. I've missed feeling like we're a team. Relief flooded Ashley's face. We are a team. I'm sorry if I've made you feel otherwise. Derek squeezed her hand gently while thinking about the recordings Tony had made of Ashley mocking Derek's pathetic attempts to save their marriage. The woman sitting across from him now, earnestly pledging renewed commitment, was the same person who'd laughed about his cluelessness just days earlier. There is one thing, Ashley said, her tone shifting to something more businesslike. I might need your help with something work-related. A financial document that requires both our signatures. Derek's attention sharpened. What kind of document? It's complicated, but essentially the firm is restructuring some client accounts, and since we're married, they need both signatures for certain financial instruments. Ashley's explanation was vague, deliberately so. Derek nodded as if this made perfect sense, while mentally noting that Ashley was already laying groundwork for whatever scheme she and Kevin might be planning. Of course, whatever you need. Ashley's smile was radiant with relief. Thank you. I knew I could count on you. The rest of dinner passed with Ashley playing the role of reconnecting wife, while Derek calculated his next moves. He now knew that Ashley and Kevin were desperate enough to attempt some kind of financial fraud involving Derek's signature. This gave him leverage he hadn't expected and accelerated his need to finalize the resort purchase. The next morning, Derek met with Harold Pemberton at the Grandview Resort to formalize their agreement. Harold had decided to sell to Derek for 15% below his asking price, impressed by Derek's genuine appreciation for the property's history and his detailed business plan for its future. You remind me of myself 40 years ago, Harold said as they signed the preliminary agreements. Someone who understands that business success and family values don't have to be mutually exclusive. Derek accepted the compliment while privately reflecting on how drastically his definition of family values had evolved. Protection of his children remained paramount, but his willingness to extend that protection to his wife had died the day he'd learned about her betrayal. The financing arrangements required Derek to leverage virtually everything he owned, but the numbers worked. More importantly, the resort purchase would be completed within 2 weeks, giving Derek substantial assets that would be protected in any future divorce proceedings. That afternoon, Derek received an unexpected call from Nicole. Ashley's sister sounded worried. I think Ashley might be in some kind of trouble, Nicole said without preamble. She called me yesterday asking about borrowing money. When I asked why, she got defensive and hung up. Derek expressed appropriate concern while filing away this information. Ashley's financial desperation was escalating faster than he'd anticipated. Did she say how much she needed? Derek asked. $50,000. Derek, I love my sister, but I don't have that kind of money just lying around. And her explanation about temporary cash flow issues didn't make sense. After reassuring Nicole that he'd look into Ashley's situation, Derek called Tony Ricci for an update on Kevin Mitchell. The news was devastating for Kevin and, by extension, for Ashley. Mitchell's construction company is done, Tony reported. His primary investor pulled out yesterday after learning about the adultery charges. He's facing personal bankruptcy within the month. Derek absorbed this information with cold satisfaction. Kevin's financial collapse would leave Ashley with no escape route and no resources to fund whatever desperate scheme she was planning. That evening, Ashley approached Derek with the financial documents she'd mentioned at dinner. The paperwork was complex, but Derek's analytical mind quickly identified what Ashley and Kevin were attempting. They wanted Derek to co-sign for a business loan that would essentially make him liable for Kevin's debts while giving Ashley access to substantial cash. This seems pretty complicated, Derek said, reviewing the documents. Maybe I should have our attorney look it over. Ashley's face went pale. That's not necessary. It's just a standard business financing document. The lawyers at my firm have already reviewed everything. Derek pretended to study the papers more carefully. I'm not comfortable signing something this complex without understanding it completely. Give me a few days to research it. Ashley's desperation was palpable. Derek, this is time-sensitive. The opportunity could disappear if we don't act quickly. Derek looked at his wife with newfound clarity. She was trying to make him financially liable for her lover's debts while maintaining the fiction that this was a legitimate business opportunity. The audacity was breathtaking. I understand it's urgent, Derek said gently. But $50,000 is a lot of money. I need to be responsible about protecting our family's financial security. Ashley's mask slipped for just a moment, revealing the calculation underneath. Of course, you're right to be careful. That night, Derek lay awake listening to Ashley make hushed phone calls in the bathroom. He could hear the stress in her voice even through the closed door. Kevin's world was collapsing, Ashley's backup plans were failing, and Derek held all the cards without either of them realizing it. The next morning brought news that would reshape everything. Tony called to report that Kevin Mitchell had been arrested for check fraud. Apparently, his desperate attempts to keep his business afloat had led him to write checks against accounts that didn't have sufficient funds. Derek felt a surge of savage satisfaction. Kevin's arrest would trigger a series of cascading problems that would destroy any remaining plans he and Ashley might have harbored. When Ashley returned from work that evening, her face was pale with shock. She'd clearly learned about Kevin's arrest, though she couldn't explain her distress without revealing the affair. Rough day? Derek asked with false sympathy. The Henderson account is officially dead, Ashley said, her voice hollow. The client is facing serious legal issues. Derek nodded sympathetically while privately celebrating Kevin's downfall. I'm sorry, honey, but maybe this is for the best. You said the account was causing you stress. Ashley's laugh was bitter. Yeah, maybe it is for the best. Derek spent the evening comforting his wife over the collapse of her affair, all while finalizing the details of his resort purchase. The irony was almost overwhelming. Ashley was seeking solace from the man she'd betrayed, while that same man was positioning himself for a new life that would exclude her entirely. Within 48 hours, Derek would own a luxury resort worth several $1 million. Ashley would be tied to a man facing criminal charges and bankruptcy, and Derek's children would be protected from the chaos their mother had created. Derek Sullivan had learned that patience wasn't weakness, it was preparation. And after months of careful preparation, he was finally ready to reveal just how much stronger he was than anyone had imagined. Chapter 6: The Perfect Storm. Kevin Mitchell's arrest triggered a cascade of consequences that exceeded even Derek's carefully orchestrated plans. Within 24 hours, local news outlets picked up the story of the construction company owner charged with multiple counts of fraud. Ashley came home from work looking as if she'd aged years in a single day. Derek watched his wife attempt to process the destruction of her escape plan while maintaining the fiction that Kevin was merely a difficult client. Her performance was masterful, appropriate concern for a professional setback without revealing the personal devastation she was experiencing. I feel terrible for his family, Ashley said over dinner, her voice carefully controlled. These kinds of scandals affect everyone, not just the person responsible. Emma looked up from her spaghetti. What's a scandal, Mommy? It's when someone makes very bad choices that hurt a lot of people, Ashley explained, her words carrying more weight than their daughter could understand. Derek noted the irony of Ashley explaining the consequences of bad choices while living the reality of her own deception. His wife and children are the real victims, Derek agreed. They didn't choose any of this. Ashley flinched almost imperceptibly at the mention of Kevin's family. Derek knew from Tony's surveillance that Ashley had no idea Kevin's wife had been provided with evidence of the affair. In Ashley's mind, Stephanie Mitchell was simply an innocent bystander to Kevin's financial crimes, not a woman actively fighting for her fair share of marital assets. That evening, Derek received a call from Harold Pemberton confirming that all financing had been approved and the resort sale would close in 5 days. Derek felt a surge of anticipation mixed with cold satisfaction. In less than a week, he would own a property that would provide both financial security and the perfect venue for his final revelation. Derek had been planning something special for his family, a gathering that would include everyone who had underestimated him, betrayed him, or treated him as insignificant. The newly acquired resort would provide the perfect setting for what Derek had begun thinking of as his reckoning. The next morning brought another unexpected development. Ashley's phone rang during breakfast, and Derek heard her sharp intake of breath when she saw the caller ID. "I need to take this," she said, stepping outside onto the patio. Through the window, Derek watched Ashley's animated conversation, her free hand gesturing frantically as her voice rose and fell. When she returned, her face was pale and drawn. "Everything okay?" Derek asked. "Fine. Just more work drama related to the Henderson situation." Ashley's smile was brittle as glass. "I might need to go in early today to deal with some paperwork." Derek nodded sympathetically while mentally calculating what kind of desperation would drive Ashley to meet with Kevin despite his arrest and public disgrace. Tony's surveillance would provide the details, but Derek could already imagine the scene. Two conspirators whose carefully laid plans had collapsed into mutual recrimination and panic. That afternoon, Derek finalized the catering arrangements for what he'd told Harold would be a small family reunion at the resort. Harold had been delighted to help plan Derek's first event as the new owner, offering suggestions for local vendors and sharing stories about successful gatherings he'd hosted over the years. "There's something special about bringing family together in a beautiful setting," Harold had said. "It creates memories that last a lifetime." Derek agreed completely, though his definition of memorable might differ from Harold's expectations. By Thursday evening, Derek had assembled his guest list and sent invitations for a weekend celebration at a special venue he was excited to share with everyone. His mother Barbara had accepted immediately, pleased to be included in what Derek described as a significant family announcement. His cousin Michael and Aunt Linda had also confirmed their attendance, along with Ashley's sister Nicole. Ashley herself had been the most challenging to convince, claiming work obligations that Derek knew were really about her desperate attempts to manage the Kevin situation. But Derek had insisted, framing the weekend as a chance for them to reconnect as a family after the stress of recent weeks. "I have something important I want to share with everyone," Derek had told her. "Something that will change everything for our family." Ashley had interpreted this as a positive development, perhaps Derek's decision to make a major career change or investment. She'd agreed to attend, though her enthusiasm felt forced. The final piece of Derek's plan involved ensuring that Kevin Mitchell would be at the resort as well. This required more delicate orchestration, but Derek had learned that Kevin's legal troubles had temporarily freed him from jail, pending his arraignment. A carefully worded anonymous message to Kevin, suggesting that Ashley needed to see him urgently at a specific location, had accomplished the rest. Derek spent Friday evening at the resort, ostensibly helping Harold with the ownership transition, but actually ensuring that every detail of his plan was perfectly arranged. The main lodge would host the family gathering, while Kevin would be directed to a private cabin where he could wait for Ashley's arrival. Harold had been impressed by Derek's attention to detail and his obvious affection for the property. "You're going to do wonderful things with this place," the elderly man had said as he handed over the final ownership documents. Derek accepted the compliment while privately reflecting that Harold had no idea how transformative this weekend would be, though perhaps not in the way either of them anticipated. Saturday morning dawned clear and beautiful, perfect weather for what Derek had planned. He'd arranged for his family to arrive at staggered times throughout the day, with Ashley coming last at Derek's specific request. Barbara Sullivan was the first to arrive, her sedan pulling up to the main lodge precisely on time. Derek met her at the entrance, enjoying the look of surprise and approval on her face as she took in the resort's elegance. "Derek, this place is magnificent," she said, accepting his kiss on the cheek. "How did you find it?" "Through a colleague at work. Wait until you see the rest of it." Derek gave his mother a complete tour, watching her expression grow more impressed with each amenity. Barbara Sullivan appreciated luxury and status, and the resort represented both in abundance. "Are you thinking of investing in this place?" Barbara asked as they stood on the main lodge's deck overlooking the lake. Derek smiled mysteriously. "Something like that." Michael and his family arrived next, followed by Linda and her boyfriend Carl. Derek welcomed each group with the perfect blend of excitement and mysterious anticipation. Nicole came alone, having driven down from her apartment in Charlotte, and Derek could see the questions in her eyes even as she admired the resort's beauty. By late afternoon, everyone except Ashley had arrived, and been settled into their accommodations. Derek had orchestrated the logistics so that his guests would have time to explore the property and appreciate its luxury before Ashley's arrival triggered the final act of his plan. Derek checked his phone and saw a text from Tony confirming that Kevin had arrived and been directed to the designated cabin. Ashley was driving down separately, expecting to find Derek's family gathering and having no idea that her lover was waiting just a few hundred yards away. As Derek stood on the lodge's deck watching his assembled family enjoy cocktails and conversation, he felt a cold clarity settle over him. Everyone who had underestimated him, betrayed him, or treated him as insignificant was now in the same place at the same time. Ashley would arrive within the hour, expecting a pleasant family weekend, and instead finding herself at the center of Derek's carefully orchestrated revelation. Derek Sullivan had spent months being patient, methodical, and strategic. Tonight, he would reveal exactly who he'd become and what he was capable of achieving. The people who had seen him as weak would learn the difference between weakness and preparation. The storm Derek had been building was finally ready to break, and when it was over, everyone would understand that some people, when pushed beyond their limits, don't just fight back. They reshape the entire battlefield to their advantage. Chapter 7: Revelations and Consequences. Ashley arrived at sunset, her BMW pulling into the resort's circular drive just as Derek had calculated. He watched from the main lodge's window as she parked and stood for a moment, taking in the property's grandeur with obvious confusion. This wasn't the modest venue she'd expected for a family gathering. Derek met her at the entrance, playing the role of excited husband one final time. "What do you think? Beautiful, isn't it?" "Derek, this place must have cost a fortune to rent for the weekend." Ashley's voice carried a note of concern, probably calculating expenses they couldn't afford given her mounting financial pressures. "Don't worry about the cost," Derek said, taking her overnight bag. "This weekend is about bringing family together." As they walked toward the main lodge, Derek could see Ashley scanning the property with new appreciation. The resort's luxury was undeniable, and he watched her mental calculations shift from concern about expense to curiosity about how Derek had managed to secure such an exclusive venue. Inside the lodge, Ashley was greeted by the assembled family with varying degrees of warmth. Barbara Sullivan's embrace was perfunctory, Michael's overly hearty handshake suggested too much alcohol, and Nicole's hug lasted just a beat too long, conveying unspoken support. "Ashley, dear," Barbara said with her practiced smile, "Derek has been so mysterious about this gathering. Do you know what he's planning to announce?" Ashley's laugh was slightly strained. "I'm as curious as you are. Derek's been very secretive about the whole thing." Derek watched his wife work the room, making appropriate conversation while clearly struggling with her own stress. She looked beautiful in the soft lighting of the lodge's main room, wearing the blue dress Derek had always loved, playing the role of devoted wife and mother with the skill of someone who'd been practicing deception for months. As the evening progressed through dinner and drinks, Derek maintained his mysterious anticipation while observing the group dynamics. His mother dominated conversations with her usual mix of backhanded compliments and subtle corrections. Michael grew increasingly loud and opinionated with each drink. Linda and Carl stayed close together, clearly uncomfortable with Barbara's barely concealed disdain for their relationship. Nicole remained quietly observant, her eyes frequently finding Derek's with questions she couldn't voice in present company. Ashley grew more relaxed as the alcohol worked its magic, laughing at Michael's stories and even engaging warmly with Barbara about the children's recent achievements. Derek felt a strange detachment watching Ashley perform. She was genuinely good at this, reading social dynamics, saying exactly what each person wanted to hear, making everyone feel valued and appreciated. It was a skill that had served her well in her career and her deception. But tonight, Derek would demonstrate that some audiences couldn't be manipulated. As the evening wound down, Derek stood and raised his glass, drawing everyone's attention. "Thank you all for coming," he began, his voice carrying easily across the room. "I know you're curious about why I brought everyone together, and I promise to explain everything. But first, I want to talk about family." Derek paused, letting his eyes move around the room, landing briefly on each face. Family is supposed to be about loyalty, trust, and mutual support. It's supposed to be a safe harbor where we can count on each other no matter what challenges we face. Ashley smiled warmly at him, clearly expecting Derek's announcement to be something positive about their marriage or his career. Barbara nodded approvingly, pleased to hear her son discussing family values. Unfortunately, Derek continued, his tone shifting subtly. I've learned that not everyone in a family shares those values. Some people see family relationships as opportunities for personal gain. Others view family loyalty as weakness to be exploited. The room's energy changed as Derek's words registered. Ashley's smile faltered slightly, and Barbara's expression grew concerned. Derek, Nicole said quietly, what are you trying to say? Derek set down his glass and pulled out a manila folder he'd placed on a side table earlier. I'm saying that sometimes the people closest to us are the ones who cause the most damage. And sometimes, the only way to protect what really matters is to expose the truth, no matter how painful it might be. Ashley's face had gone pale. Derek, I don't understand what you're getting at. Don't you? Derek opened the folder and pulled out a series of photographs, surveillance images of Ashley and Kevin together at hotels, restaurants, and other locations. Because I think you understand perfectly. The silence that followed was deafening. Ashley stared at the photographs with a look of pure terror while the rest of the family processed what they were seeing. Oh my God, Nicole whispered. Barbara Sullivan's face had transformed from confusion to cold fury. Ashley, what is the meaning of this? Ashley's mouth opened and closed soundlessly before she found her voice. Derek, we should discuss this privately. The children are safely at Linda's for the weekend, Derek interrupted. And there's nothing private about adultery when you've been planning it for months. Derek pulled out more documents, printed emails, hotel receipts, financial records of Ashley's attempts to defraud him. With each piece of evidence, Ashley seemed to shrink further into herself. This is Kevin Mitchell, Derek said, pointing to the man in the photographs. Ashley's lover and business partner in an attempt to defraud our family of $50,000. Michael, sobered by the revelation, leaned forward. Jesus, Ashley. Is this true? Ashley looked around the room desperately, seeking an ally or an escape route. Finding neither, she straightened with visible effort. You don't understand the whole situation. Then explain it, Derek said calmly. Explain how planning to leave your husband for a man facing fraud charges represents a misunderstanding. The room erupted in voices, Barbara's outraged questions, Michael's drunk commentary, Linda's gasps of shock. But Derek remained focused on Ashley, watching her realize that her carefully constructed facade had been completely demolished. You've been spying on me, Ashley said, her voice barely audible above the family chaos. I've been protecting myself and my children from a woman who was planning to destroy our family for her own selfish purposes. Derek's voice remained eerily calm. The same woman who laughed about my pathetic attempts to save our marriage while plotting to steal our money. Nicole stood abruptly. I think I should leave. This is between Derek and Ashley. Actually, Derek said, I'd like you to stay. Because there's more. Derek walked to the lodge's main entrance and opened the door. Kevin, you can come in now. The family turned as Kevin Mitchell walked into the room, his expensive suit rumpled, his face showing the strain of recent events. Ashley gasped audibly at seeing her lover in the same space as her family. Everyone, Derek announced with cold formality. I'd like you to meet Kevin Mitchell, Ashley's boyfriend and the man she was planning to leave me for before his arrest for fraud. Kevin looked around the room with obvious discomfort, clearly realizing he'd been manipulated into a situation he couldn't control. Derek, Ashley found her voice. This is insane. You can't just. Can't what? Derek interrupted. Can't expose lies? Can't protect my children from a mother who was planning to abandon them? Can't ensure that the people who betrayed me understand the consequences of their choices? Barbara Sullivan stood, her face flushed with anger. Get out, she said to Ashley, her voice carrying the authority of someone accustomed to being obeyed. Get out of this family gathering immediately. Mom, Derek said quietly. Ashley isn't the only one who's confused about family loyalty. Barbara turned to him in surprise. What do you mean? Derek pulled out another set of documents. I mean the beach house invitation list, Mom. The one where you deliberately excluded Ashley's family while making sure she felt unwelcome. The years of passive-aggressive comments designed to make her feel like an outsider. Barbara's expression shifted from anger to confusion. Derek, I was protecting our family values. You were protecting your own sense of superiority, Derek corrected. just like Ashley was protecting her own selfish interests. Both of you treated me like someone too weak to fight back. Derek walked to the center of the room, commanding everyone's attention. Here's what you all need to understand. This resort, I own it. I bought it this week with money I've been carefully managing without anyone's knowledge. Ashley's affair gave me the motivation to stop being passive, and Kevin's financial crimes gave me the opportunity to acquire assets that will be protected in the divorce proceedings I'm filing on Monday. The silence was complete now, everyone processing Derek's revelation. You bought this place? Michael's voice was awed despite the circumstances. Every acre, every building, every amenity, Derek confirmed. And Ashley, Kevin, you're both trespassing on my property. Ashley found her voice again, desperation replacing shock. Derek, we can work this out. I made mistakes, but we can. No, Derek said simply. We can't. You made your choice when you decided I was too weak to matter. Kevin made his choice when he participated in your schemes. Mom made her choice when she decided treating my wife with cruelty was acceptable family behavior. Derek walked to the lodge's entrance and opened the door again. Security will escort you both off the property. Your belongings will be delivered to you next week. As Ashley and Kevin were led away by the resort's security team, Derek turned back to his remaining family members. For everyone else, you're welcome to stay the weekend and enjoy the amenities. But understand this, I'm not the same person I was yesterday. I won't tolerate disrespect, I won't absorb criticism for the sake of keeping peace, and I won't protect people who see my kindness as weakness. Barbara Sullivan, for perhaps the first time in her life, looked genuinely uncertain. Derek, I don't understand what's happening. What's happening, Mom, is that your son has grown up. And it turns out I'm much better at playing hardball than anyone imagined. Derek walked out onto the lodge's deck, leaving his family to process the wreckage of their assumptions about him. Through the window, he could see Ashley and Kevin being escorted to their cars, their desperate conversation animated by gestures and tears. Derek Sullivan had spent months learning that patience wasn't weakness, it was preparation. Tonight, he demonstrated that some people, when pushed beyond their limits, don't just fight back. They reconstruct the entire game in their favor and invite everyone to play by new rules. The old Derek was gone forever. In his place stood someone harder, richer, and infinitely more dangerous to cross. And everyone who had underestimated him now understood exactly what that transformation meant for their futures. Chapter 8. The New Order. The morning after Derek's revelation dawned crisp and clear, the lake's surface reflecting the autumn sky like polished glass. Derek stood on the main lodge's deck with his coffee, watching his remaining family members process the previous evening's events. Nicole had stayed, as Derek knew she would. Her loyalty had never been in question, and her presence provided a bridge between Derek's old life and whatever came next. Barbara Sullivan had also remained, though she'd spent most of the night in her room, presumably grappling with the discovery that her son was far more capable than she'd ever imagined. Michael had left at dawn with his family, claiming urgent business but clearly uncomfortable with the new power dynamics Derek had established. Linda and Carl had departed even earlier, offering polite excuses about prior commitments that fooled no one. Derek felt no disappointment at their departures. The people who mattered had revealed themselves through their reactions to crisis, and Derek had no interest in maintaining relationships built on false assumptions about his character. That was quite a performance last night, Nicole said, joining Derek on the deck. It wasn't a performance, Derek replied quietly. It was an education. Nicole studied his profile, clearly seeing someone different from the brother-in-law she'd known for 8 years. What happens now? With Ashley, I mean. Derek's smile was cold and final. Ashley made her choice months ago. Now she lives with the consequences. Inside the lodge, Barbara Sullivan emerged from her room looking older than her 68 years. She approached Derek cautiously, as if unsure of her welcome. Derek, about yesterday. Yesterday you learned that actions have consequences. Derek interrupted gently, but firmly. For 8 years, you treated my wife with cruelty disguised as concern. You excluded her family from gatherings, criticized her choices, and undermined her position in our marriage. Barbara's face flushed. I was protecting you from someone I thought was wrong for you. You were protecting your own sense of superiority, Derek corrected. And it turns out you were right about Ashley's character, but for all the wrong reasons. Derek turned to face his mother fully. Here's what's going to happen. You're welcome in my life and my children's lives, but only if you can treat everyone in our family with basic respect. No more passive-aggressive comments, no more deliberate exclusions, no more power games. Barbara Sullivan had dominated every relationship in her life through sheer force of personality, but something in Derek's tone made it clear that those days were over. "And if I can't accept those terms?" she asked quietly. "Then you'll find yourself excluded from the family gatherings you're so fond of controlling." Derek replied without hesitation. The old Derek would have softened the blow, offered reassurance, or sought compromise. But the old Derek had been weak enough to be manipulated by everyone from his wife to his mother. The new Derek understood that respect was earned through strength, not kindness. Later that morning, Derek received a series of frantic phone calls from Ashley. He let them go to voicemail, then listened to her increasingly desperate messages with cold detachment. "Derek, please call me back. We need to talk about the children, about custody arrangements. You can't just cut me out of their lives. I know you're angry, but we can work this out. I made mistakes, but I'm still Emma and Lucas's mother. Derek, I'm at a lawyer's office. If you don't return my calls, I'll have to file emergency custody motions." Derek deleted each message without responding. Ashley was operating under the assumption that Derek was acting emotionally, that his anger would cool and he'd be willing to negotiate. She had no idea that every aspect of his response had been calculated months in advance. Derek's attorney, Patricia Chun, had already filed comprehensive divorce papers that included detailed evidence of Ashley's adultery, her attempts at financial fraud, and her planning to abandon the children for her relationship with Kevin Mitchell. The custody arrangements Derek was seeking would give him primary physical custody, with Ashley receiving supervised visitation pending psychological evaluation. The financial aspects of the divorce would be even more devastating for Ashley. Derek's careful timing meant that the resort purchase was completed before Ashley could claim any marital interest in the property. His retirement accounts had been liquidated and converted to protected assets. The family home would be sold, with Derek taking his equity and Ashley receiving only her legally mandated share after substantial legal fees. But Derek's most devastating move involved Kevin Mitchell's criminal situation. Tony Ricci had provided Derek with evidence that Ashley had knowledge of Kevin's financial crimes and had potentially participated in money laundering through her access to Derek's accounts. This information had been shared with federal prosecutors, who were now investigating Ashley as a potential co-conspirator. Derek felt no satisfaction in Ashley's destruction, only cold calculation. She had chosen to betray him and abandon their children for a man facing criminal charges. Now she would learn that some choices, once made, could never be unmade. That afternoon, Derek sat down with Emma and Lucas to explain their mother's absence and the changes coming to their family. He'd spent weeks preparing for this conversation, consulting with child psychologists to ensure he handled it appropriately. "Mommy and Daddy are getting divorced," Derek explained gently, sitting with his children in the resort's family room. "Sometimes grown-ups discover they want different things in life, and they decide they can't be married anymore." Emma, at 9, had questions. "Is it because Mommy was working so much?" "Mommy made some choices that hurt our family," Derek said carefully. "But the most important thing for you to understand is that both Mommy and Daddy love you very much, and that will never change." Lucas, at 6, was more concerned with immediate practical matters. "Are we going to live here now? This place is awesome." Derek smiled genuinely for the first time in days. "Yes, buddy. This is our new home." Over the following weeks, Derek's new life took shape with remarkable speed. The resort required significant management attention, but Derek's analytical skills translated well to hospitality business operations. He hired Harold Pemberton as a consultant, keeping the elderly man involved in the property he'd loved for 40 years. The children adapted to their new environment with the resilience Derek had hoped for. Emma loved the lake and the hiking trails, while Lucas made friends with the resort's maintenance staff, who indulged his fascination with machinery and boats. Ashley's legal situation deteriorated rapidly. Her association with Kevin Mitchell had made her radioactive in the marketing industry, and her attempts to find employment were hampered by the pending criminal investigation. The supervised visitation arrangements meant she could see Emma and Lucas only under court-appointed supervision, and even those visits were strained and uncomfortable. Derek observed Ashley's downfall with the same detachment he'd applied to her surveillance. She had been given every opportunity to choose differently, to end the affair, to work on their marriage, to prioritize their children's welfare. Instead, she doubled down on deception and betrayal until Derek had been forced to protect himself and their children. Barbara Sullivan's relationship with Derek evolved more positively than he'd expected. His mother's respect for strength and success meant that Derek's demonstration of both had fundamentally altered their dynamic. She visited the resort regularly, but her interactions with Derek and the children were notably more respectful and less controlling. "I underestimated you," Barbara admitted during one of her visits, sitting with Derek on the lodge's deck as Emma and Lucas played on the lake's shore. "Everyone did," Derek replied without bitterness. "I encouraged it by being too willing to avoid conflict." "Your father would be proud of what you've built here," Barbara said quietly. Derek nodded, accepting the compliment without the desperate gratitude he might once have felt. His need for his mother's approval had died along with his tolerance for manipulation and disrespect. 3 months after that decisive weekend, Derek received a final phone call from Ashley. She was facing indictment on money laundering charges and wanted to negotiate a custody arrangement that would allow her to see the children without supervision. "I know you're angry," Ashley said, her voice carrying the exhaustion of someone whose life had completely collapsed. "But I'm still their mother. I made mistakes, but I don't deserve to lose my children completely." Derek listened to her plea with the same analytical detachment he'd applied to her destruction. "You didn't lose your children, Ashley. You traded them for a relationship with a man facing criminal charges. You made that choice, and now you're living with the consequences." "Derek, please. The custody arrangements are final," Derek interrupted. "If you can rebuild your life and demonstrate stability, we can revisit the situation in a few years. But understand that your children's welfare is my only priority now." After ending the call, Derek walked out to the resort's dock where Emma and Lucas were feeding ducks with bread they'd saved from lunch. They looked happy, secure in their new environment and their father's protection. Derek Sullivan had learned that some people, when pushed beyond their limits, don't just fight back. They reconstruct the entire battlefield to ensure victory is permanent. Ashley had taught him that love could be weaponized, that trust could be exploited, and that the people closest to you could inflict the deepest wounds. But Ashley had also taught him that strength, properly applied, could protect what truly mattered and eliminate threats before they could cause further damage. The old Derek had been weak because he'd confused kindness with strength and forgiveness with wisdom. The new Derek understood that some betrayals could never be forgiven, some people could never be trusted, and some lessons, once learned, would guide every decision for the rest of his life. Chapter 9. The Price of Betrayal. 1 year after Derek's devastating revelation at the resort, the transformation of his life was complete and irreversible. The Grandview Resort had become one of the region's premier destinations, with occupancy rates exceeding 90% and a waiting list for prime weekend bookings. Derek's business acumen, combined with his methodical attention to detail, had turned Harold Pemberton's aging property into a luxury hospitality empire. Emma and Lucas had adapted to their new life with remarkable resilience. Emma, now 10, had become the resort's unofficial junior naturalist, leading other children on hiking expeditions and lake exploration adventures. Lucas, 7, had convinced Derek to let him help with the resort's morning fishing charters, his enthusiasm and natural charm making him a favorite among guests. Derek stood in his office, which occupied the top floor of the main lodge, reviewing financial reports that confirmed what he already knew. He had built something extraordinary. The resort's success had enabled him to expand, acquiring 2 adjacent properties that he was developing into vacation rental compounds. His net worth had increased tenfold in 12 months, all while providing his children with a stable, enriching environment. The intercom buzzed, and Derek's assistant announced that his mother was arriving for her weekly visit. Barbara Sullivan's relationship with Derek had evolved into something resembling mutual respect, though Derek maintained clear boundaries about her influence over his decisions. "Derek," Barbara said as she entered his office, "the place looks wonderful as always. I saw Emma teaching a group of children about local bird species. She's becoming quite the leader." Derek accepted the compliment with a nod. His mother's praise no longer carried the weight it once had. but he appreciated her genuine affection for her grandchildren. I have some news, Barbara continued, settling into the chair across from Derek's desk. I ran into Ashley at the grocery store yesterday. Derek's expression didn't change, but he felt the familiar cold focus that Ashley's name still triggered. How is she? Not well, Barbara said bluntly. She's working as a receptionist at a dental office, living in a small apartment on the south side of town. She asked about the children. Derek had known about Ashley's reduced circumstances. His attorney received regular updates on her situation as part of the ongoing custody arrangements. Ashley's criminal charges had been reduced to a misdemeanor plea deal, but the damage to her career and reputation was permanent. Kevin Mitchell had served 8 months in federal prison and had declared bankruptcy upon his release. What did you tell her? Derek asked. That they were thriving and that you were an excellent father, Barbara replied. She started crying right there in the cereal aisle. Derek felt nothing at the image of Ashley's public breakdown. The woman who had mocked his pathetic attempts to save their marriage, who had planned to defraud him while abandoning their children, had discovered that choices carried permanent consequences. She asked if there was any chance of reconciliation. Barbara continued. I told her that ship had sailed long ago. Derek nodded approvingly. His mother's loyalty, once she'd committed to it, was absolute. That afternoon brought an unexpected visitor to the resort. Nicole arrived unannounced, her usual warm demeanor subdued by obvious stress. We need to talk, Nicole said without preamble, accepting Derek's offer of coffee in his office. About Ashley? Derek guessed. Nicole nodded. She called me last night, Derek. She's not doing well. Financially, emotionally, mentally. She's barely holding it together. Derek listened without comment, waiting for Nicole to make her point. I know what she did was unforgivable, Nicole continued. I supported your decision to protect yourself and the kids. But Derek, she's my sister. And she's Emma and Lucas's mother. Is there a question in there somewhere? Derek asked quietly. Nicole took a deep breath. She wants to see the children, more than the supervised visits allow. She thinks if she could spend real time with them, maybe prove she's changed. No, Derek said without hesitation. Derek, Nicole, Ashley had every opportunity to choose differently. She chose to betray our marriage, plan to abandon our children, and attempt to defraud our family. Those choices had consequences. Nicole's eyes filled with tears. She made terrible mistakes, but she's paid for them. Isn't there room for forgiveness? Derek stood and walked to his office window, looking out over the lake where Emma and Lucas were playing with other resort children. Their laughter carried across the water, a sound of pure joy and security. Forgiveness isn't about Ashley, Derek said finally. It's about protecting my children from someone who's proven she can't be trusted with their welfare. Nicole joined him at the window. What if she could prove she's changed? What if she got therapy, found stable employment, rebuilt her life? Derek turned to face Ashley's sister directly. Nicole, I want you to understand something. Ashley didn't just have an affair. She didn't just make a mistake. She systematically planned to destroy our family for her own selfish purposes. She mocked my attempts to save our marriage while plotting to steal our money. She was prepared to abandon Emma and Lucas for a man facing criminal charges. Derek's voice remained calm, but Nicole could see the steel underneath. People like that don't change. They just get better at hiding their true nature. So there's no path back? No way for her to earn a place in her children's lives. The supervised visitation will continue, Derek said. If Ashley can demonstrate genuine stability and rehabilitation over several years, we can discuss modifications. But she will never again have unsupervised access to my children. Nicole nodded sadly, clearly understanding that Derek's position was final and non-negotiable. That evening, Derek received an unexpected phone call from Ashley herself. He almost declined the call, but curiosity made him answer. Derek, Ashley's voice was barely a whisper. Nicole told me she talked to you today. She did. I know I have no right to ask for anything. Ashley continued, her words rushing together as if she feared Derek would hang up. But I'm begging you to consider giving me a chance. I've been in therapy for 6 months. I'm working steady hours. I've completely changed my life. Derek listened to Ashley's plea with the same detachment he'd felt during her destruction. Have you really changed, Ashley? Or have you just run out of other options? The silence on the line stretched long enough that Derek wondered if the call had been dropped. I deserve that, Ashley said finally. I deserved everything that happened to me. But Emma and Lucas didn't deserve to lose their mother. Emma and Lucas didn't lose their mother, Derek corrected. Their mother abandoned them for a man facing criminal charges. Their mother was prepared to defraud their family to fund her new relationship. Their mother mocked their father's attempts to preserve their family. Ashley's soft crying was audible through the phone. I know what I did. I know I can never take it back. But I love them, Derek. I love our children. Love is demonstrated through actions, not words, Derek replied. Your actions showed that you loved your own desires more than your children's welfare. What can I do? Ashley's voice broke completely. What would it take for you to give me a chance? Derek considered the question seriously. Nothing, Ashley. There's nothing you can do. You had 8 years to be the wife and mother we needed. You chose to be someone else instead. Derek, please. The supervised visitation will continue, Derek said, echoing his earlier conversation with Nicole. Beyond that, you have no place in our lives. Derek ended the call and turned off his phone, feeling the same cold finality he'd experienced the night of his revelation. Ashley wanted forgiveness, wanted a path back to relevance in their lives. But Derek had learned that some bridges, once burned, could never be rebuilt. Later that evening, Derek tucked Emma and Lucas into their beds in the resort's family quarters. Their rooms overlooked the lake, and both children had grown to love the sound of water lapping against the shore as they fell asleep. Daddy, Emma said as Derek kissed her goodnight. Some kids at school ask why Mommy doesn't live with us anymore. What should I tell them? Derek had prepared for this question, consulting with child psychologists about age-appropriate explanations for complex adult situations. You can tell them that sometimes grown-ups make choices that change families, Derek said gently. But the most important thing is that you're loved and safe, and that will never change. Emma nodded solemnly, accepting the explanation with the adaptability of childhood. As Derek walked through the resort's main lodge after putting the children to bed, he reflected on the conversation with Ashley and Nicole. Both women seemed to believe that forgiveness was a virtue Derek owed to Ashley, that mercy was somehow required after a suitable period of punishment. But Derek had learned that forgiveness was a luxury he couldn't afford when his children's welfare was at stake. Ashley had proven that she was capable of systematic deception, long-term planning for betrayal, and prioritizing her own desires over her children's needs. Those weren't mistakes. They were character traits that no amount of therapy could truly change. Derek Sullivan had spent 32 years learning to be patient, methodical, and strategic. He'd used those qualities to protect his children and build a new life that provided them with security, opportunity, and unconditional love. Ashley's desire for redemption was understandable, but Derek's responsibility was to his children's future, not Ashley's feelings. The old Derek might have been swayed by tears, by pleas for second chances, by appeals to forgiveness and mercy. But the old Derek had been weak enough to be betrayed by the person he'd trusted most. The new Derek understood that some people, once they'd revealed their true nature, could never be trusted again. Ashley had taught Derek that betrayal was a choice, not a mistake. She'd shown him that the people closest to you could inflict the deepest wounds while convincing themselves they were justified. But she'd also taught him that strength, properly applied, could protect what truly mattered and eliminate threats before they could cause further damage. Derek walked out onto the lodge's deck, looking up at a sky full of stars reflected in the lake's calm surface. Tomorrow would bring new challenges, new opportunities, and new proof that he'd made the right choices for his family's future. Ashley would continue living with the consequences of her betrayals, just as Derek would continue building the life she'd forced him to create without her. Some lessons, once learned, guided every decision that followed. And Derek Sullivan had learned that some people, when they showed you who they really were, deserved to be believed the first time. The price of betrayal, Derek had discovered, was not just the loss of what you'd tried to take. It was the permanent forfeiture of what you'd already had. Ashley had gambled their family's future on a relationship with a criminal and lost everything that had ever truly mattered. Derek felt no satisfaction in her destruction, no pleasure in her suffering. He felt only the cold certainty that he'd protected his children from someone who'd proven she couldn't be trusted with their welfare. And in the end, that protection was worth every bridge he'd burned and every relationship he'd sacrificed. The strong survived, and the weak made excuses. Derek had chosen strength, and his children would inherit the security and opportunity that choice had created. That was Ashley's real legacy, not the pain she'd caused, but the strength she'd forced Derek to discover within himself. Some betrayals could never be forgiven because forgiveness would require trusting the betrayer with the power to cause harm again. Derek would never give Ashley that power over his children's lives, no matter how much she claimed to have changed. The price of betrayal was permanence, and Ashley would spend the rest of her life learning exactly what that meant. This is where our story comes to an end. Share your thoughts in the comments section. Thanks for your time. If you enjoy this story, please subscribe to this channel. Click on the video you see on the screen, and I will see you there.